this movie, I want to take a closer look at how to work with and edit clips in the Multitrack environment. We have already seen a bit of this on how you can trim clips, add fades, move clips around, and so on. But here, I want to cover a couple other ways you can work with your clips. Now, I need a slightly longer bit of audio to work with here. So, I am just going to grab the Maya intro file that we have worked with before. I have copied it to my desktop and I'll just select it and open it. And I'll switch back to the Multitrack session here. I'm just going to drag that file on this third track currently labeled Book Review. Now, if you are working along with me and you don't have access to the exercise file, just bring in audio clip that's more than a few seconds long. So, yes, as we've seen, you can easily move clips around once they are on your track. I can drag it left and right to change when it starts playing in relation to the rest of the tracks. You can even drag clips up or down onto other tracks. I'm going to leave it butted against the left side so it starts playing immediately. And while I'm doing this, I'm just going to go ahead and mute the other tracks so I will only hear this track. Alternately, I could have of course just solo this track too. Now, the great thing about editing clips in multitrack mode is that nothing you do is destructive. I am about to chop this clip up, move bits of it around and perform other changes to it, but nothing I do is going to affect the original WAV file sitting on my desktop. All the edits that I performed here in multitrack mode are simply instruction to Audition on how to play this clip at any particular point in the timeline. Now, if I did want to make a permanent change to the WAV file, I would just double click it, which opens it in a waveform editor. So anything I do in here like changing the volume or adding fades affects the actual file, and those things will be reflected in any multitrack project that this file is a part of. But I am not going to make any changes here. I am just going to click multitrack to go back to my multitrack project. Now, for example, there are a couple of seconds of sounds here at the beginning of this clip before the speaker starts talking, and I want to trim that away. And as we have seen, to trim the ends of any clips on your tracks, place the cursor over the right or left end so you see this bracket icon and then drag in. I'll just drag it right before the speaking starts, and I'll drag this clip back to the left so that when it starts playing from the very beginning, the speaking starts right away. Hi, I am Mohammed Zahid. But if I go back to the file itself, notice that the empty space is still there at the beginning of this waveform, so that what I mean by non-destructive when you are editing in a multitrack mode. Now, sometimes you will trim a clip because you need it to be at a precise length. So maybe you have trimmed the clip to the length you need, but you didn't quite grab the portion of the audio you wanted to keep. Instead of having to undo and then trim the clip again, you can just grab the slip tool. This lets you move your audio around inside the clip, so the clip stays the same duration, but the portion of the audio that's played can be moved or slipped left and right. You probably see this best if you can see the whole clip. And notice, I can use a slip tool. That clip is staying the exact same length. But now, I can adjust the contents within the clip. So I can bring back that sound at the beginning, but in doing so, I am cutting off the very end of the clip. So, that's the slip tool. Let's look at some other ways to edit and alter your clips. I'm going to jump over to about the 51-second mark, and I'll just zoom in on that a little bit. And there's a slight flub here that I need to edit out, and inverse kinematic switches. Then we are going to take a look at facial animation at how one more time and then we are. So there's a little bit of flub here. Now realistically, this is probably the case where I would go back and edit this out of the original file. But who knows, maybe I really don't want to alter that original file at all, and I can still completely fix it here in my current project. Now in the waveform editor, you delete sections of audio simply by dragging a selection and pressing delete. Here in the multitrack editor, we need to use a different tool. I'm going to grab the razor tool up here. Now, there are actually two tools here if you click and hold. There's the razor selected clips tool and razor all clips tool. In this case, I want to make sure I have the razor selected clips tool, which is the default. Razor all clips tool actually affects all your clips where you cut. So notice, if I select the selected clips tool, when I bring the razor in, you see this line showing me where I am going to make my cut. But if I select the All Clips tool. That line extends across all of my tracks. So if I did have other clips above and below this track, they would also be cut at the location I click. So I'm going to switch back to the other tool, and all I have to do here is click on either side of the portion I want to get rid of. One there and one there. Now you want to be careful when you click, and I'll demonstrate this again. Let me undo that. If you have your cursor over this volume line here, you are actually going to place what's called a keyframe on the volume instead of clicking with the tool. I'm going to be talking about this tool later in this chapter, but just make sure you are not clicking on that line. I'm going to click there and there. Now in real life, I would probably be more precise in this by first listening closely to the clip again and maybe adding some markers where I want to make my cuts. And I'm just doing a quick edit here and show you the razor tool. So I have made those cuts, and now I have 3 separate clips on this particular track. The one before the first cut, the one between the 2 cuts, and the clip after the second cut. I'm going to press V on my keyboard to switch back to the Move tool, so I can click that center clip to select it. And now I can simply press the delete button on my keyboard and bam, it's gone. Again, totally non-destructive. The original file is still safely intact. I've just told Audition to cut out this portion of this particular instance. But now I also have this large gap here that I need to close. Now I can do a couple of things here. I can simply grab the right clip and drag it toward the first clip. Notice, when the 2 clips starts to overlap, something interesting happens. Audition automatically inserts a crossfade, so the transition between this clip isn't as harsh. It fades out the first clip and fades in the second clip. Now this probably isn't an issue in this example, because I have a natural gap and dialogue already between the 2 clips. But if this were a continuous disk audio file, the cross dissolve might be more useful. I'm just going to undo that for now by pressing Command Z while Control Z on Windows. So when I was dragging, you might have noticed that the clip just kind of moves smoothly across the track. And that's nice in some cases. But what would be really convenient here is it would detect the end of the other clip and just snap to it. So I can completely close the gap between the clips. But right, it kind of just goes right over that point, and I can really tell exactly where they meet. Now I'm going to right click on my timeline. Go to snapping and choose enabled. Notice the keyboard shortcut here is simply S. Let me go back to that menu again. Underneath enabled, you can check all the different elements you would like, items like clips and the playhead to snap to. You can snap to rulers, markers and so on. I'm going to make sure that snap to clips is selected. So now when I drag my clip left, you can see it snapping with other points along with the timeline. For instance, right here, it will snap to the playhead. But as I get closer to the other clip, they snap together. It's kind of like 2 magnets coming together, which is why snapping is represented this button up here with the magnet in it. That's how you turn snapping on and off, rather than having to right click and choose enable here on pressing S. You can just use this button. So now when I come back here, snap them together, I now know there's no overlap between the clips, and as you saw, I can continue to drag to create that crossfade again. But I don't want to in this case. I just want them to snap together end to end. But actually there's more than one way to close that gap. I'm going to press undo several times till I get back to the point before I deleted that center clip. And this is probably the easiest way to close the gap. Instead of selecting that clip and just pressing delete on my keyboard, I can press Shift Del to do what's called a ripple delete. That removes the clip and closes the gap that clip leaves all at once. Pretty cool, right? I'm going to undo that one more time. Now, what if you just have a gap between clips with no clip to ripple delete between them? Maybe you just drag the clips onto your track. Just delete that. All you have to do here is right click in the gap. Choose the ripple delete and choose gap, and that closes the gap. Alright, so that's ripple deleting. Now, when it comes to dragging your clips around, sometimes you want to be able to be a little bit more precise, and maybe the snapping feature isn't really helping. I want to show you another useful command you can use in those cases. I'll just select one of these clips, and onto the clip menu, you will find a nudge left and nudge right. As their name indicates, this commands nudge your clip either left or right by tiny increments. So to nudge your clip, just make sure it's selected. I am also going to open the properties panel here so you can see the changes. Watch the clip start and clip end time. Now, it's not really necessary to open the properties panel here. I just want to demonstrate to you so you can see how small these increments are, because you can't really see it by looking at the clip over here most of the time. So again, to nudge your clip, make sure it's selected. And when I use the keyboard command off, in this case Opt plus or comma, I'm nudging it tiny increments less than a second in each direction. This can be useful when you are trying to time some clips together precisely and dragging with your mouse just isn't working. And again, since everything I've done here is non-destructive, I can always revert the clip back to the way it was or bring back audio that I cut out. For example, if I wanted to get rid of the cut that I made and go back to the original audio, I could just delete the second clip and then place my cursor on the right edge of the first clip to get the trim tool and then just drag it all the way to the right to reveal the remainder of the audio in this particular clip. I can even go back to the beginning where I chop out that little bit of silence and get that back too. Okay, so there you have a couple of ways to work with the clips in Multitrack view. And again, I do want to add that word of caution that when you're dragging or clicking on your clips, try to avoid clicking on the yellow horizontal line that runs through them. Again, that's the volume control tool, and we'll be looking at how that works later. But for now, just know that when you click it, you might end up changing the volume of your clip at the point. Notice that you get a slightly different looking cursor when you roll over the volume line. Anywhere else in your clip is free game for clicking those. So just keep that in mind, it's going to undo that. To get rid of that point, I added. But again, there you have a couple of ways to work with clips in Multitrack view.